Hello, and welcome back to Health and Wealth. I'm Ana Ramos, and I am so glad that you're here with us. There's something deeply powerful and often invisible about the way our nervous system responds to safety, to that steady voice, that gentle touch, a loving presence in the room. Way before language, way before logic, way before identity, there is regulation. Our bodies learn what safety feels like long before we understand the word. In that early wiring, those first experiences of connection quietly shape how we respond to stress, how we form relationships, and how we move through uncertainty. Today, I'm joined by Debbie Radzinsky, a trauma-informed therapist who over 2 decades of experience helping individuals and couples build deeper self-awareness and more meaningful relationships. Debbie trained at institutions including the Anne Fruit Center in London and Hunter College in New York. And her work is rooted in attachment theory, the understanding that early bonding shapes emotional regulation for life. She believes that when we feel safe enough to be seen and supported, we can peel back the layers that no longer serve us and reconnect to our inner strength. In this conversation, we explore how early attachment regulates the body, how our nervous systems learn safety, or bracing it, and how those early imprints continue to influence the way we live, love, and cope with life. Because if safety was wired early, that wiring may still be shaping us today. So take a breath, settle in, let's begin. Debbie, thank you so much for joining us today. I am so jazzed for this conversation because it's something that, we're just going to get going with it. It's about our attachment style, right? And sometimes I know that when you and I spoke about it, was like, what is an attachment style? So first and foremost, welcome.
Thank you so much, Hannah. So excited to be here with you.
Oh, likewise. The only thing that will make it even better is next time that you're here in person. That would make it even better. So, this conversation it's about our attachment style. And, I think that it's so important to become aware of that and to become present to that, because sometimes we just go in this routine, right? And we don't understand why we react to things, why our nervous system feels the way it does. So I'm just going to kick this off right off the top because this happened to me with a client of mine that she actually said to me, she goes, Anna, when you come to the room or when something happens, you have this way of speaking to me that my nervous system just calms down. Like it's your voice, it's your energy, it's your approach. And well, everybody around me is like up and down and at different intervals. Here you come in, and no matter what happens, you regulate my nervous system. So let's talk a little bit about that, because it wasn't until I spoke with you that it became an aha moment for me.
Oh, I'm so glad. This is a passion for me, attachment and relational consciousness and nervous system regulation. Yeah, so the attachment is biological before it becomes mental. So all the words that we have now as adults matter, but what matters most is how we feel in our body, how we feel in our nervous system, which is like a tree inside our body that feels everything before we even have words for it. So it's nonverbal, right? So what you're saying, like about your client, who said, Anna, I basically like I feel dysregulated, but when you walk into the room, there's something about you I can't fully name, but I feel so different and so much better. And that tells me that, this person feels really calm with you, really secure with you. If you're their financial advisor, maybe you have a relationship, a trajectory with her or with him that, has shown repeatedly safety and security, like I've got you. I mean, that's a message that's really important because the nervous system really doesn't believe cognition as much as it believes repetition in patterns. So what keeps showing up, and also it believes energy. It believes energy that now can be measured in, types of waves in the brain and cortisol levels and adrenaline levels. But when nervous systems are contagious and they communicate, like, I don't know
Oh,
if you know,
wow.
yeah, I don't know if you know, like aspen trees, have a structure underneath the earth, and their roots connect and they communicate. And our nervous systems are the same. So when we're with people that are calm and have presence, we feel calmer. And when we're with people that maybe are trying to have that behavior, but internally are not feeling that way, so there's not as much coherence between the inside and the outside, and they are not feeling it that well, we feel it. Dogs feel it, babies feel it, children feel it.
That's amazing. So when does this association, like, if you have this calm voice or steady present, when does this association begin with us as humans, right? Because I mean, based on what you're saying, would you say that it begins when we're like babies, when we're super tiny, when we can't even speak, right? We don't have the words, or we speak, but we don't have the words in when we're speaking. When does this all begin?
Yeah, this begins, when we're born and we're babies, everybody comes with a nervous system and a temperament. Some nervous systems come more cooked. I call them more cooked, and other nervous systems come less cooked, more green. And by cooked, I mean some nervous systems, some babies come in feeling safer in the world already, and other babies come, a bit more what we call nervous, or, feeling less safe. And what happens is, first of all, the baby, babies are developing in the womb, and they are feeling energetically so much of the mother's uh, emotional states, not only energetically, but also biologically, right? I mean, they've done studies, so many studies, that mothers who are pregnant that are in very high levels of stress, that affects, the baby, the fetus forming. Mothers who live in, highly polluted places, that affects the fetus. So there's all these exchange in communication since the baby's in the womb. And then when the baby is born, um, the caregiver could be the mother, the father, both moms, both dads, different kinds of families. But when the baby is born, the baby needs what we call in psychology holding, needs an external co-regulator to borrow somebody else's nervous system to feel safe. The
Oh,
baby
wow.
doesn't necessarily know, in their soma, in their body, they don't necessarily know that they are safe. So they cry, right? Like sometimes we change a baby's diaper, we put a baby in the changing table, and then some babies are fine with that. Other babies feel like that motion can feel really unsettling, and they cry a lot. And then there might be the mother that says, "Oh, that was scary, you didn't like that, putting you down like that, or you didn't like to have your legs without your swaddle, or, but we need to change your diaper." And, this is where attunement, which is a really important concept in general for relationships, comes in, which is how much can the caregiver, the mom, dad, can read and understand, and then empathize, and then meet emotionally the baby.
That's incredible, Debbie, because I'm sure, and we'll talk a little bit more, because I want to talk about how that later manifests in lives, with our connection, our relationship with money, and even relationships with other people and things like that. But tell me a little bit more about this early attachment experiences, right, that you're describing. How do they shape our own sense of safety and self-worth from such a young age?
Yeah, beautiful. Well, this first attachment, John Bowlby, who is the like father of attachment, explained very early on that the first way that we're related to imprinting us. So it creates a blueprint for how then we relate. So let's say we have a caregiver who is very attuned and is very able to be very present and calm, has, safety for them, support. So like this mother, father can be very present with the baby, can meet the baby often, then it's very possible that baby will develop a secure attachment, would feel when I have a need and I express it, I get met. When I feel vulnerable, I get met, or I get somebody that helps me make sense of what I'm feeling. Like if I fall and I get scared, and there's a caregiver that says, "Oh, ouch, that hurts. Did you get scared?" And holds, let's say the toddler, that helps that mind, that body feel safer. And they've proven this with experiments. When a caregiver comes closer to a distressed child, the child's cortisol levels lower kind of fast, because this connection, this attachment is so strong. So what happens later on is that these early relationships have this blueprint for other relationships. So when we've had secure attachment and caregivers that are attuned, we tend to unconsciously look for that. When we've had caregivers that maybe didn't know how to deal with the baby's vulnerability, so said like, "Don't cry, everything is fine, you got this, you're strong." And I'm not saying this with judgment, but that happens. Then a lot of these children learn that vulnerability is not safe. It's not safe to express. So they start repressing it, because ultimately we humans are wired for connection and belonging, and we seek that a lot. So this person might then build a life that's very independent and self-sufficient, and then unconsciously look for a partner where there's they can't express their vulnerability. But ultimately we all need to express vulnerability, so sooner or later it will catch up with people, and relationship will repeat in patterns. And what I always say is that often what serves us in the first part of our lives, in our patterns of relationships, messes us over later if we don't become conscious of our patterns and we don't develop more awareness regarding how we really want to be in relationships.
I love the fact that you're kind of taking it from a very young age into adulthood, how these patterns of either security or insecurity affects us, not only with ourselves but also the relationship with others. It's very interesting, because sometimes as we get older, we're like, well, why is it that I feel like that? Or why is it that I'm always dating the same person, or I'm always working in the same spot? I mean, that even happened to me, where I worked in corporate America, and I'm loyal to a fault. I'm a Gemini and I'm loyal to a fault. But if there's one thing that's going to break that particular loyalty with me, is if you ask me two things: either ask me to go against my ethical blueprint, or you ask me to do something unethical. That would kill my loyalty to you in 2 seconds. And my pattern was that I went from corporate to corporate, and I would stay there until this would happen, but I would end up again in the same situation the next corporate job I had. It wasn't immediate, but it manifested itself later on, like 4 or 5 years later. And it wasn't until I put a stop to it all, and I physically became present to it, and I said, no more. And it was such a switch that happened at that point, but it took so much effort and power in me to kind of do that awareness and that switch over. So how does somebody in adulthood, because don't even ask me how I became aware of it, but it was very, I guess I was aware, but unaware. How does someone in adulthood kind of begin to understand that, hey, this is an attachment style that got developed from early on, and kind of how do they relate it? How do they just become aware and fix that?
First of all, I love what you just shared, about how you realize that and the way you described it. That's, very classic, is that relational patterns get repeated because the unconscious is always looking for safety and familiarity. And the unconscious will repeat what's familiar even if it doesn't serve us anymore. So exactly what you described. So we need to become conscious. First of all, we need to feel the distress of it to wake up and say, oh my God, this feels awful. This is not okay. I mean, and the common denominator in these relationships is me. It sounds like all of this happened to you. The common denominator is me. And oh my God, sooner or later, this pattern comes up again and it feels awful. And I don't want that. And then there is a different kind of like wake up in consciousness, and then we need to work with that, kind of like you did. And I mean, you did a lot of beautiful things, which is you woke up to it, you decided that that was not okay for you, that that didn't feel good, and that you didn't want to continue to move forward with that. And then you started, sounds like, tolerating a little bit more of the discomfort of saying no more. And also, it sounds like you increased your pause between what was happening from your boss or this corporate situation and you, to try to make different decisions as of how you were going to move forward relationally, where you were going to honor yourself with what you needed. You were going to be attuned to yourself. You were going to meet yourself. And for that, you were going to set boundaries. You were going to communicate differently. You were going to act differently. But in what you described, there's a lot of internal shifting that's happening, which usually also happens in therapy. That's what, that's my bread and butter. That's what I do daily, helping people learn about what's happening inside them, and also helping them to shift their patterns. And so one way is one channel is what happens inside the person. And then the other channel is we get wired in relationships, and the brain is plastic, neuroplasticity, this big concept now that we know. It's not static and rigid, but it's constantly changing, and it changes through experiences. So we get wired in relationship and we get rewired in relationship. So relationship with ourselves and relationship with others. So also who we continue to choose to have relationships with, and increasing the people that we can have a safe relationship with, and having, a therapist, a coach, being part of a group where we can, be in a safe environment that's well held and with high awareness, where we can feel safe. It allows us to have what we call in psychology emotional corrective experiences. So we start feeling, safer. We start feeling like, okay, I can be myself, or I can be messy, or I can be angry, or I can express, resentment, or I can express vulnerability, and it's okay and it's safe. And as that happens and that gets repeated, it settles in the body, in the nervous system, and our brain gets rewired. It's like building a new city, a new,
Yes.
set of,
Rewiring, a new rewiring. And Debbie, what would you say are the early signs? Like how do we become aware of it? Because like I know on my end, it took a lot of presence, a lot of tears in the process of letting go and being present to the hurt that it created in me. What are some of the early symptoms? Like I'm not gonna say early symptoms, but well, early symptoms and early awareness that the relationships that we're in, right? Which is a result of our attachment style. What are the early symptoms? Like how do we say, "Oh, wait a second. this is due to this, or this is not feeling good? What are those early symptoms?
Yeah, great question. It's kind of broad, but I'm going to bring it, I'm going to try to simplify it as much as I can. First of all, just the fact that you don't feel good in an exchange, in a relationship, that's the first flag, it's like, And what we feel more in the gut and in the heart, not so much in the mind. So when we start feeling like, something doesn't feel good here. And sometimes it takes a while for some people to understand why it doesn't, and it can be because some people are saying the right thing, but that is not really what they are feeling. So the nervous system can feel, oh, that's not safe. Uh, it can also be that the relational needs are different. So let's say, you know, let's say Anna, we're in connection, and you want to express vulnerability, and maybe that's hard for me. So maybe, but I don't know about it, but I start changing the topic, pushing it away. You will feel it, right? You will start feeling, even if you don't know it at the beginning, you would feel like, oh, that was yucky, or I couldn't really open myself up. And maybe that's your relational need. You feel like, I really want to open up. Like, if we're talking, if we have a connection, I want to be able to be myself. So all those hits of like, this doesn't feel good, that's not meeting your relational needs. Those are the wake up flags. Those are the wake up calls. And they could be, then you can learn more. There's now also a ton on social media and online, but then you can learn more. Oh, maybe if somebody doesn't text me right away, I feel anxious. Like that's more anxious attachment, right? It's like, oh, it makes me feel scared that maybe they are not texting me because I did something wrong, or maybe they are not texting me because they don't like me anymore. And oftentimes people are in their own worlds, but that points out the stories that come to your mind after those first hits of the emotional impact in the relational space is what points at what could be happening. And just getting curious rather than swifting it under the rug, getting curious about, oh, what's happening with me?
Yeah.
Listening to the different voices inside you, allowing for that unfolding is key.
I think that's wow. You said it so beautifully, Debbie, and I think it goes back to that sense of self worth, right? Because when things don't feel good, it begins to affect our self worth, right? But if we can take it to the next level, where it says, well, it's not about me. It's really more about something that happened to me way back then, how I developed that, and then it's working through it. So it's whether it's you work through it yourself, or you seek for a therapist like you, where it can help somebody to, I'm going to say, unclog the system, right? To kind of start creating order to it. Now, one of the things that in this podcast, a lot of things that I talk about are things that I've lived through, right? So one of the things that I've noticed is that when I'm in moments of stress, right? Um, no matter how much studies I made, how much, people I've spoken to, that original wiring, right? It just comes out, right? And like with me, I notice that when I'm under stress, I just go on a do mode, right? And sometimes when I go on my do mode, I lose the connection that I share with people, right? That special alignment of energies and nervous system, right? So when we're looking at stress, why is it that stress reveals our inner wiring? And that inner wiring has a lot to do with our attachment patterns, right? Which later go into our behavior. Talk to us a little bit about what stress does to our nervous system, to ourselves, to our attachment style.
Yeah, beautiful point. Yeah, stress definitely reveals more of our attachment patterns because stress puts the brain and the nervous system into more of survival, right? Is when we are stressed, when stress is high, we there's a peak. We call it, in psychology, like our reptile brain gets more awakened. So our amygdala, which is the fear center, gets more awakened, and we're scanning more for threat. And when we go, there's more fear. There are different chemicals in our bodies, and so when we are under stress, our relational capacity lowers, and our emotional regulational capacity lowers. And that's why, um, even like in romantic relationships, right? It's so common. People say it's like, well, let's see how things go after the honeymoon period. Because at first, right, and also falling in love is like a drug, and it's beautiful and amazing. And then after that beginning, when life becomes more real and stress hits and life throws all these curveballs, uh, we get to see how relational people can be in the relationship, how emotionally mature they can be, how they can regulate themselves, how they can show up in the relational space even when they are stressed. How can they repair? How aware they are of their effect on others, not only their intentions. All of that, which comes under the umbrella of emotional maturity or emotional immaturity or evolution, emotional evolution, is really key. So stress, you know, lowers our capacity for all of that. And then the more evolved, the more developed we are into this, the more we can keep that, the more, despite the stress, which is really the ask, right? Can you remain relational? Can you remain regulated to a certain degree? Can you remain present? Can you remain, present in your connections and with yourself despite the stress? And how can you take care of yourself when you're stressed? How can you reach for support? But, not lose it completely, or scream, or become super avoidant and turn the other side, because all these pieces, all these reactions have a big impact in your relationship. So if you're not aware of them, you're going to really impact your relationships, and people are not going to want to be around so much. The intimacy in your relationship, the level of connection, the level of depth, the quality will go down. And often people come to therapy and say, I don't know why, but the intimacy went down, I don't feel as good, and I don't know why. And then as we explore and awareness starts rising, people realize that their own role and their own responsibility and their own growth.
I think that's so beautiful because, relationships, it's one of the five pillars, right, that we talk about. And, and when I talk about relationships, I talk not just about the relationship with ourselves, but the relationship with, well, not just the relationship with others, but the relationship with ourselves. And I think it really begins, the relationship with ourselves reflects in the relationship with others. And I think you said it so beautiful because sometimes it's, when we are in those relationships, and I'm not just talking husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, right? It's girlfriends, is your work relationships. I mean, we're like, going back to the very beginning, you said we have a need as humans to be part of a community, to be in relationships. And I think it's so beautiful to be aware of not just us, but others as well, right? Because in today's world, there's so much about, gaslighting, and and we have all these things that we've had to give label to how the person react. But I think that what we are not aware of is that they're reacting that way because of their attachment style and what they originally grew up with, right? And it's so interesting because the next question I want to say is like, okay, so now you realize this, how do you fix it? But before I ask that question, I want to understand, because we are talking about relationships, how do these attachment styles later in life shape in our relationship with money?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, I often say there are three topics that are the hardest for people to talk about, and those are money, sex, and death. So, just to preface, like, money is a hard topic because money means different things for different people, and even different things at different times of our lives. So money can mean power for somebody, money can mean safety for somebody else. I mean, often is very connected to safety, but it means different things for different people. So, and also we live in a world where we need money. I mean, capitalism, we need money to go around.
Absolutely.
And money can be beautiful and allow us to have safety and fun and spaces to be of service and help, and also spaces of play. And um, I very much believe in abundance in all areas of life. So how does it apply to money? Because money, in a way, if we see this relationship of humans to money through an attachment lens, money can be like an attachment figure in a way, because, you know, people can relate to it with feeling safe or unsafe. So, for example, somebody who maybe grew up, poor, and then, makes money, um, might still feel that those numbers are not enough, and might still be kind of like stuck in feeling very unsafe because that was really traumatizing, and might not, be able to reach that level of safety. Um, Somebody else might, be able to develop it and feel like,
Yes.
this amount is enough, and I feel really great and it's wonderful. I mean, I'm sure you see it a lot with amounts and things, right? Everybody's different. I mean, I see it in my own self, even with my husband, like how much we each like to have, which numbers and where, and it's so linked to our psychologies and our histories, and it's intergenerational too, the histories of our parents and our ancestors and how we came to have access to money. But I think it's just really important to say that there's a level of safety that money brings, that's key for us to then be able to be more relational and, more established, and that's privilege. And yeah.
No, and you said it beautiful. We can go like a whole topic talking about that, because at the core of everything, I created this podcast which is called Health in Wealth. So people talk about health and wealth, but people don't talk about the health inside of wealth. And ultimately, the bigger company, it's all about transforming your vision of wealth, right? So it's transforming your vision and your relationship with wealth and with money. And going along that subject line, that it feels, it creates safety, and for some people it's safety, for some people it's other things, right? For some people it's freedom. And because even when I sit down with clients for the first time, I ask them, what's your definition of wealth? And then I ask them what is their value system, because I'm trying to understand how money, or what role money plays in their lives, right? But another question I have for you: what about, how do these early attachment styles help us when we look at risk, right? When we look at risk, when we look at safety, when we look at, every aspect, right? Entrepreneurship, like, how do these attachment styles manifest later on in life when we're looking at those things?
Yeah, yeah. That question makes me think of toddlers, because, and we were just talking about it with our dogs. Anna and I, we both love toy poodles. We love our dogs so much, and they often act as toddlers too. So this makes me think of toddlers, because toddlers start exploring the world, right? But attachment wise, they still come to their caregiver for to feel good. Like, you often, if you're observing toddlers in the park or in a birthday party, you would see them go and explore and then come back and maybe hug the mom or the dad, or look at the mom or the dad. And or sometimes if they get upset, they come back and, they get an exchange, or, that can be physical, can be words, can be both. And then they go back to explore. So I feel like that everybody has a different level of comfortability of exploration with money. Some people like the risks of trying, like when you go to, an amusement, park, some people like the huge roller coasters, other people don't. Like, some people really like the adrenaline, and other people don't. So that's very personal and has to do with everybody's own way of being. But ultimately, with safety and attachment, everybody has their own comfort zone of what they feel comfortable doing, and I'm sure you see that all the time. And it's about honoring that, presenting the options, and then yeah, some people prefer to be less risky, even if they are gonna gain less, and other people are more willing to risk. And that has to do with attachment, but also has to do with, chemistry and temperament and ultimate safety, right? Because if you have a good chunk of money, it's easier to be, there's more safety. So it's easier to be risky with a small
Right.
chunk than if you just have an X amount. You don't want to be as risky. And it also has to do with where we are developmentally in our trajectory, right? If you're in your 30s or in your 40s, it's easier to risk than if you're in your 70s. So yeah, I think it's multidimensional.
And I think you said that so beautifully, because when I first work with clients, it's like, and I meet them and I have these conversations with them, I know where I need to take them, but I also assess their level of readiness, right? And I try to create, there was a previous conversation I had with a guest, and they're like, "Oh, so that's your secret? You make them cry with you?" And I'm like, "No, that's not really my secret. But if they end up crying, it's because I know that I've hit home, right? I know I've hit that point where they become vulnerable, which is going back to what we originally started with. And it's from that point of vulnerability that now the safetiness, the trust starts coming, and they allow you to guide them. But I also feel a lot of sense of responsibility, that they now trust me so much that I also have to be able to be very present as to where they're being guided to. And it's just, for me, it's a beautiful experience, honestly. It's to be able to do that, it's something beautiful. And so as we come to a close, Debbie, and I know that we could go in so many different directions, and I can't wait to welcome you back because I have so many more questions for you. Um, you know, once we recognize this, because I always promise the listeners that we're going to give them biohacks, right? Because we are humans and we want to be able to take action today and have results yesterday happen, right? That's just who we are as human beings. Tell us a little bit about, like, if you had somebody and I said, what would the biohack be? And not so much on the medical side, but like, someone realizes this. So they're listening and they're like, wow, I never realized that my connection to money, or my connection with other people, my connection to myself has to do with my attachment style. And, what guidance would you give them? What biohack would you give them to say, listen, it's great that you become aware of it, or at least you're listening to it and you're relating it to yourself. What biohacks would you give them to say, hey, these are the next steps for you to do so that you can start seeing impact, whether it's from a self awareness perspective or how you begin to rewrite your attachment style?
Yeah, yeah. I love that question to leave, people who are listening with like some golden nuggets. Um, it's tricky because this is more, the rewiring is more of a process, but what I would say is uh pay attention. Pay attention. If what you are listening in here is touching you, maybe open a notes app on your phone and start paying attention to the ways that you're feeling in relationship to money, or in relationship with others, or in relationship with yourself, and write down how you're feeling and when you're feeling that way. Notice if there are patterns, like, oh, every time I need to meet with my financial advisor, I feel really anxious, or I feel like I'm not smart enough. And then also pay attention to the ways that you feel somatically, like in your body, the nervousness, the sensations, and also pay attention to the stories that are in your mind that are unique to you, because oftentimes these stories and these beliefs are outdated, or are limited, or are not true. And as we become conscious about them, and we can kind of like read them, or and become more aware of them, we can then question them. So open a notes app, become aware of how you're feeling when you don't feel good, become aware of the stories and the narratives in your mind that come with that, or the beliefs that are in your mind. Write those down and then question them. Is this true? Is this absolutely true? This is part of the work, Byron Katie, which is brilliant and amazing, and it's a great way to work with limiting beliefs. But that could be a really great way for people to start unraveling getting curious, approaching themselves with curiosity. And what I often say to my patients, I say, we're all made of different parts. The self is made of different parts. And when some of the parts, all the parts deserve to have tea at the table. So have tea with that part that you're identifying. And literally, I mean, I'm a big fan of tea, so I do sit with cups of tea often during the day. But I would say to people, whether it's concretely or symbolically, sit with that, be with that, get curious. And then if you want more, get into therapy or get into a process group or do more research. But I think that's a good start.
I think that's so beautiful, and I wouldn't dare top that off. I think that's such great advice. And so with that, Debbie, I want to say thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to to talking to you again. And I look forward to some point welcoming you to Mexico City, where we're doing these recordings from. And again, thank you so much for sharing with us such an important topic that sometimes we're just not aware of it. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna, for having me. This was fun and so great. Thank you so much.
Likewise, thank you. I'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.
As we close this conversation, what stays with me is how early the story begins. Way before achievement, before ambition, even before performance. There is a nervous system that either learn I am safe or learn I must prepare. And that early learning does not disappear. It lives in the way we respond to stress, in the way we attach, in the way we brace or soften when life feels uncertain. Sometimes what we call personality is actually protection. Sometimes what we call independence is adaptation. Sometimes what we call control is simply the body trying to feel safe. Health and wealth has always been about integration, about understanding that our financial lives are not separate from our emotional wiring, that the way we relate to uncertainty, to receiving, to stability, often echoes something much older. So perhaps the invitation today is not to fix yourself, but it is to notice. To notice when your body tightens, to notice when it relaxes, to notice what safety feels like, and where you may still be bracing. Because regulation is not weakness, it is actually capacity. And when the nervous system feels safe, everything else, including how we live, lead, and build wealth, begins to shift. Debbie, thank you for guiding us back to the beginning. And to everyone listening, take a breath. Your body remembers, and it can learn safety again. Until next time, this is Health and Wealth.